Today early morning, Russians blew up the Nova Kakhovka hydroelectric plant dam. The dam held back the huge water reservoir that is now flowing uncontrollably over the dam, flooding all of the downstream areas, which includes Kherson city and a lot of the settlements. We're talking tens of thousands of people who are living in the flood area and hundreds, if not thousands of homes. We're talking animals, domesticated and wildlife. All of it will be underwater by the time this video has been uploaded. The water level will reach its critical and maximum level 5 hours after the destruction of the dam, which will have passed by the time you watch this video. All of the footage you see here is from today, about the dam or about the flooding. This is a man-made natural disaster. This is a terror act against Ukrainian people. In this video we'll go through about the consequences of this terror act and we'll talk about the reasons why Russia did it. First of all, how do we know Russians did it? Well, because there's a video of it, there's a security cam footage that they didn't even erase. In this video we can see the dam exploding with a huge amount of explosives. They used a lot of explosives, let's put it that way. I mean, back in the Soviet time, in the year 1950 to 55, when this dam was built, it was a marvel of the Soviet Union. It took the entire Soviet industrial capability to build this dam, and it took them 5 years, and we're talking about the Soviet Union. I mean, they did mega projects insanely fast. And now Russia blew up all of its elements, the turbines, the dam itself, everything is damaged. The hydropower plant is not working. Let's not forget the little detail that last year Russia held a pseudo-referendum in Kherson area claiming Kherson and its people and the surrounding areas as part of Russia. So, from the Russian perspective, they did it to their own people. Remind you of something. Reminds me of Stalin and his action and terror against his own people, especially against the Ukrainians. Let's not forget about the Holodomor. And the Russians have definitely shot themselves in the foot here because Crimean Water, the peninsula water, comes from this water reservoir. Russian-occupied Crimea has a huge issue, desertification. Before Russia occupied it, it had mostly fields, crops. It was an agriculturally very productive area under the Ukrainians, but when Russia occupied it, it started to turn into a desert. So, let's zoom into Nova Kakhovka. This here is the dam, as you can see, and see, this is the water reservoir, a very big water body that filled to the level that this channel right here would be filled with water. And let's just follow the channel. Where does it go? It goes to Crimea. And on this map it looks like a small blue stream, but this actually feeds most of the Crimean water that Crimea needs for agriculture and for drinking water. Now that this water reservoir is being emptied, Crimea will be a desert. There will be no agriculture in Crimea anymore. Putin has ensured Crimea will be a useless desert under Russia. But the thing is, with this action also Putin has sent a message that they are preparing to fight and lose Crimea. I mean, he has poured billions to get water to Crimea, to build the Kerch Bridge, you know, to connect Crimea with water and with land to Russia. Now he has just taken that away. Water is the most important aspect to be able to live there. He's just taken that away. He's getting ready to lose Crimea. When Russia occupied the western bank of the Dnipro River, including Kherson city and the surrounding areas right here, they were afraid that Ukrainians would do this, because if Ukrainians would have blown this dam, and I'll show you the map later where the flooding will happen, but right now you can see it on my cursor, most of this area would have been flooded, and it is flooded right now, meaning that it is impossible to cross the Dnipro River back when they occupied this western bank. And if Ukrainians would have attacked back then and the dam would have been blown, 40,000 Russian troops with a lot of heavy equipment, ammunition, everything they had, anti-aircraft systems, would have been stuck physically. It would have been impossible for them to escape. And Russians were really afraid of it. Now they have done it themselves. Why did they do it? Well, it will make sure Ukrainians physically cannot attack over the Dnipro River. Russians are really in a paranoid state, the Russian army, in a headless state. They are anticipating the Ukrainian counteroffensive. They don't know where or when it will start, but they know it will start. Well, destroying this dam will make sure that the counteroffensive cannot start from this almost 90-kilometer length of the Dnipro River. Ukrainians cannot now physically cross it because, yes, the water The water will overflow these areas, then it will flow to the Black Sea, but the puddles it will create that will not flow away, and the mud and the wet grounds, this area right here will be untraversable for at least this season and maybe the next one also. No heavy equipment or men can cross it. That shows how afraid Russia is. They're ready to make environmental disasters to prevent the counteroffensive from happening from this 100 kilometers. Well, it can still happen from the south. Other thing is, you can see these downstream islands of the Dnipro River. They're now going to be mostly underwater, but as you can see, they're green. Ukrainian special forces have been fighting over these islands with the Russians for the last 6 months, and they have slowly been successful island hopping from one to another, liberating these islands. Now this takes all of that progress away and ends this campaign right now, so it is a catastrophe. I would call this one of the biggest war crimes Russia has committed in this war. In this video we can see a Ukrainian police officer rescuing a dog who is by now tired of swimming, and the current is very strong, so he's just standing trying to hold on the sides when the current is weaker, and this police officer is rescuing the dog. Ukraine is saving lives, Russia is destroying them. How is the destruction of this dam affecting the Ukrainian army and the preparations for the upcoming counteroffensive? Well, Zelensky has gathered an emergency security meeting. The evacuations of the downstream settlements, including Kherson, have started. Who will do the evacuation? Of course, the army, with their vehicles, with their manpower. This means that it will lessen their cohesion, organization. Men don't sleep. It will distract them from preparing and training for the counteroffensive. Russia is trying to take away Ukrainian ability to prepare for the counteroffensive. And for now, Ukrainian army will deal with these evacuations and will save these lives. Of course they do. I mean, people are the country. They have to. And it's the right thing to do. But it will not stop the counteroffensive. It will happen, and now Ukrainians are mad, angry, and they want revenge even more than before. Revenge for their homes that were just flooded away. This is the Russian way of delaying the inevitable. I see it the same way as the German terror bombing of London with V2 and V1 rockets in 1945. Germany knew the war was lost and they were still bombing London. Last final acts of terror before the empire goes down. In this video you can see the water already next to the administrative building of Nova Kakhovka. What's weird about it is, immediately after the destruction of the dam by the Russians admitted due to the exploding of the dam that they did it. But a few hours later this was redacted and a new storyline was put in place that the Ukrainians bombarded the dam with their rocketry. I guess new orders came from Moscow to change the narrative. You can see the scope of the flooding and the damage from these photos. It really saddens to see me how much suffering Russia is ready to produce in their paranoia, in their fear of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. That shows how much they are afraid of the Ukrainians. They're really a lesser army. Later this video we'll see the Ukrainian offensives happening right now. Russia is getting beat by the Ukrainians. Tonight also they shot out 35 cruise missiles towards Ukraine, 20 of them to Kiev, and all of them were shot down. They're using more and more terror tactics. The last dying breath of a dying empire in my eyes. My friends, here we have the Russian losses of the past 24 hours, and do you notice something strange? Something that is very different from the last 3 days we have watched these losses. 800 KIAs. Later in this video we'll go through the operations that produce these 800 KIAs for the Russians. Ukrainians have really stepped up the game on the battlefield. They had the initiative on the information and media front, and now they are grabbing the initiative on the battlefield. There are two different engagement areas, the information front and the battlefield, and now on both of them initiative is being carried to the Ukrainian side. Russia is feeling it, and this is partly why they are striking Ukraine more with cruise missiles, and also why they blew up the dam, because now all of the media will be again talking about what Russia did to Ukraine, and Ukraine is reacting. This is a Russian way to grab back the initiative very violently, committing a terror act. 12 tanks, 20 armored personnel vehicles. This shows that an offensive operation has started on the Russian side or the Ukrainian side. It doesn't matter which side does it, Russia will lose more heavy equipment if there are active operations. 36 artillery systems. Well, heavy fighting is also going on in the Belgorod region, and we'll go into it in this video also. You'll get the updates. I think a lot of it comes from there, but also from around Bakhmut and from Donetsk. 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems. Now this number is every time very small or 0, because these systems are much more expensive than anything else combined in this list. One of these systems, we're talking about S-300 or Paintser-S, whatever we're talking about, they're costing 50 million USD, perhaps 100 million USD. So anytime you see these anti-aircraft warfare systems losses, even one, it's a huge loss, unrecoverable loss. 1 helicopter was lost. Actually, I don't know if it shows on this list 0 and 1 it shows, but I know 1 Ka-52 Russian attack helicopter Alligator was shot down. This is the newest, most modern Russian helicopter with the double rotors. You can recognize this chopper by their double rotors up on the top. And Russia had about 120 of those when they started the war. Now they have about 50 left. They cannot produce any more of those because they have a lot of Western components in them. 23 UAV operational and tactical level, 35 cruise missiles. Yes, they were all shot tonight and they were all shot down. No warships, of course, but 20 vehicles and fuel tanks and 5 special equipment. Now, this special equipment might also be radar systems, which are almost as expensive as anti-aircraft warfare systems. The most important numbers here to watch always are actually artillery systems, anti-aircraft warfare systems and special equipment. Now we will talk about the Belgrade Incursion. 1 week has passed since the Russian volunteer corps Svoboda Rossiya assaulted over the Russian border for the 3rd time. And 1 week they have been in Russia. Russia still has not reacted strongly to it. They have sent conscripts to the area. They have sent armored personnel carriers and tanks. The Russian volunteer corps has managed to even widen the area they occupy right now, taken some prisoners and even taken Lieutenant Colonel as a prisoner, a very high rank. These are fires reported around Shebekino recently. Russia claims most of the citizens have been evacuated from the area to Belgorod city. What Putin was probably hoping with this incursion was that Russian people will take this as an attack against their motherland and unify, but they haven't. They really haven't at all. Russians are afraid, they're panicking, but they have not unified against one single goal of defending their motherland, which is what Putin was hoping. And it's a very good news for the Ukrainians and for the Svoboda Rossiya. They are testing the moods of the people in Russia. This entire Belgorod incursion has been such a blow, such a failure for the Russians that I think it is definitely connected to why the Russians blew the dam, to grab back the media space they lost to this Belgorod region, because all of the media was talking about the failure of Russia to defend their border. Well, now the media will be talking about what Russia did to Ukraine. This is how the initiative, this is how the tennis is played in war, information front. As I said, Svoboda Rossiya, the Russian volunteer corps, has captured a lot of prisoners and a lieutenant colonel. They offered to exchange those prisoners to the Russian governor of Belgorod area, but the Russian governor of Belgorod area refused, stating his terms like he has some maneuverability. I mean, the Svoboda Rossiya have Russian POWs. They want to give them back. But Russians don't really care about their soldiers, as we're seeing here. Even the high-ranking officer, Lieutenant Colonel, was not enough to make this exchange happen. Svoboda Rossiya representatives also say that Russian Colonel Andrei Stesev, the operative group of Belgorod Russian army commander, was killed in action. He is the highest ranking KIA of Russian army by now in Belgorod region. How does the Svoboda Rossiya work? What are their tactics? Well, they're fighting like guerrilla forces and armed forces combined, because they do occupy some areas unlike the guerrilla forces, but they use hit and run tactics. They attack very fast and then they pull out of some areas like guerrilla warfare. They don't linger much. They do extremely fast and effective strikes, which terrorize the Russian army, and then they pull back. Huge losses for the Russians, minimal casualties for themselves, because they cannot allow it to themselves. They only have a few hundred fighters. Nobody knows how much exactly, but looking at the area they occupy and the victories they get, I would say 300 to 500 fighters maximum. Now we're going to watch a video from a Russian sent to Belgorod to fight Svoboda Rossiya units coming from Ukraine. And the truth coming from this video, it's painful to watch. This really shows how Russia has failed big time to contain this volunteer corps' actions. I will be reading you the subtitles at the same time as the video. Dear friends, I am an ordinary soldier in the Russian Federation Armed Forces. My name is Vladimir Ivanovich Milyaev, 138th Brigade Infantry. Until yesterday we were on the border with Ukraine in Belgorod region. We came under the most powerful artillery shelling of our positions, including those HIMARS. We received an order to hold position, which we did. A few hours after this, UKROPS, he means the Russian Volunteer Corps, a lot of UKROPS, Ukrainians, we fired back and tried to repel them, but there were too many of them. Too many. I just said 300 to 500, and they are talking about a localized battle. So in this battle, maybe they used 100 fighters, maybe less, so there couldn't be any more. We requested permission to retreat, but were denied. So basically, fight to the death were the Russian orders. But you can only order soldiers to fight to the death if they have extremely high morale, which the Russian soldiers don't. This order doesn't work. As a result, we lost around 80% of our personnel and were forced to retreat without permission and without reinforcements. So this unit lost most of their personnel, and the survivors are now traitors of the motherland because they retreated without orders. And we have seen Russian court system, because Putin wants it, condemn this and actually punish soldiers like this. We left the border. After some time, the same situation occurred with two other groups. The Russian Volunteer Corps then mowed down entire regiments of our men. We first time hear about the Russian losses. And the units, he's talking about 138th Regiment. The Russian system works that conscripts will be involved in every unit, about half. So it's the regular army, and, you know, half of the squad is made out of conscripts. This way they can, like, mix and train the newcomers. So conscripts have died in Belgorod already. We are aware that our commander knew everything in advance about the offensive on our positions. What were you waiting for? Orders from above? But that we told you we will all die here didn't bother you? Colonel Kolchin, the blame for the death of our guys lays personally on you. You will not be able to wash off the blood of your hands to the end of your days. Because of you, we lost a large contingent of our personnel, lost a piece of the border, lost supply lines, a ton of people surrendered. Yes, a lot of Russian POWs came from this 138th Regiment. You scum sat in your offices and waited. This is the problem with authoritarian armies. Their officers and high-ranking officers are not to make orders on their own. Everything happens by the General Chief of the Army, who is Putin. Or Shoigu. If the order doesn't come from them, you risk of treason if you do anything on your own. This means the initiative is always with the enemy, because you cannot react to anything in the fear of betraying the motherland, acting without orders. This is why they sat in their offices, because the country system is like that. Authoritarian armies always lose to armies to NATO-styled armies, where initiative is even handed to the squad leader. Look around the battlefield, assess the situation, improvise, adapt, overcome. This is non-existent in the Russian army. We now have a clearer idea of what's going on the Russian side in Belgorod, and it's looking really bad. If Svoboda Rossiya would have more fighters, they could penetrate deeper into Russia, but for the fact that they only have about 500 max, with this force you cannot occupy a large area. You can only do hit and runs and stay in a very concentrated area to be able to pull back fast if necessary. I mean, the Russian border is empty there. There's nobody to fight them. If they would have, let's say, 10,000 men, they could take a vast area of land. My friends, most of my videos don't have sponsors, and this one also doesn't. But I have made some surprises for you in my merch store, Ukrainian themed merch. It will be really cool and I'll be wearing them. I hope so will you. Go and check out estoniansoldier.com, link is in the description below. Get some cool merch to show that you support Ukraine. When we meet, we'll be wearing the same hat or the same shirt. Well, my right arm will have the Ukrainian trident on it. They look really awesome. My friends, now in the military map we will watch Ukrainian local offensive operations. Last night Ukraine really stepped up their offensive game. We're not talking about a big counter-offensive, but 3 localized offensives at the same time, all of them successful enough to take some Russian positions. We'll start around Bakhmut. South of Bakhmut, this is the settlement of Klishivka, and Ukrainians have started the localized offensive operation to encircle this settlement, to cut it off. This map doesn't show it, but Ukrainians have actually penetrated through these defensive lines very close to Klishivka, and this is the northern offensive. They have also struck from the south of Klishivka to connect with the northern force. Possibly Russians will pull out or retreat before this happens. They do retreat usually before being sacked. Of course the orders are the opposite, to fight to the death, but the reality on the ground is Russian soldiers don't have that capability. North of Bakhmut, Ukrainians yesterday took this settlement of Berhivka, and they were also striking from the west, perhaps trying to connect with the Berhivka contingent, cutting off this area. But again, it's very easy for me to draw these lines on a map saying they got this off, they got that off. Russians will usually pull out, retreat, give themselves in. These surroundings don't happen like that on the battlefield like we see them on the map. The reality is different there. Prigozhin came out with an information yesterday that Russian Federation troops lost this settlement. This is not confirmed by any other sources than Prigozhin, but if he's confirming that Ukrainians took it, I believe him. This is the Donetsk city. Now we zoom into area a little bit southwest from Donetsk. Ukrainians also counterattacked here and took 3 settlements. First of all, Neskuchne, this settlement right here, they liberated yesterday. Second settlement is Nova Darivka, this settlement has been liberated. And the third one is Novodonetsk, which means New Donetsk, has been also liberated. The fact that Ukraine has started localized offensives in different fronts shows that they're poking Russian defenses, seeing where the Russian defense is weakest and crumbles, and there its point. There is the reason to send more Ukrainian reinforcements. Perhaps send some armored units in to push further. I'm sure the Ukrainians will strike where they will discover the weakest point, and now the poking game has started. The first phase of the counter-offensive. There was a firefight between Wagner units leaving Bakhmut and giving their positions to Russian units. When Wagner units were driving out of Bakhmut on a road with a Ural truck, Russian army unit opened fire on them, killing some, and then the Wagnerites fired back, killing some Russian troops and actually capturing the leader of the Russian army unit, Lieutenant Colonel. And they shook him up, and here's a video of the Lieutenant Colonel. I mean, this is publicly, officially humiliating the Russian army, done by Prigozhin's men. Let's start. Who are you? I'm Lieutenant Colonel Venevit Roman Gennadievich, commander of the 72nd Brigade. Go on, what did you do? Opened fire on a Wagner PMC vehicle while intoxicated from alcohol. So the Lieutenant Colonel was drunk. We're talking about a colonel level rank, drinking on the front, doing offensive maneuvers while drunk. Why did you do this? Due to my personal animosity. Why do you have personal animosity toward Wagner PMC? I don't know. What did you do yesterday with your subordinates? Disarmed a GBR group of Wagner PMC. How many of you were there? Size of the group? 10 to 12 people, a squad. How many people were there yesterday? Your subordinates? 10 to 12 people with me. Beside them, who else was there? A motorized rifle company. A company. Why did you do this? Due to my personal animosity. Why do you think that? What do you think, does personal animosity have any place at all in war? No. How can you How can your actions be characterized? Guilty. He says guilty about himself. We can obviously see that this man has been shooken up. Lieutenant Colonel has been beaten and forced to say. Wagnerites gave him over to the Rosgvardia, which is like the military police of the Russian army. I mean, he will probably be guilty of treason by the Russian court. But the fact that there is a shootout going on in the Russian army, and this is not a first one, and it will not be the last one. Discipline extremely low, morale extremely low, alcoholism rampant. And Prigozhin has more power than Putin wants him to have. My friends, the time is here to read out 5 new Patreon names. These are the people who support this channel no matter what. I'm very thankful for you, and I'm gonna be butcher your names. Jon S. Tiller Fingerle. Mr. Fingerle, thank you. Jochen Miva. Teknoismo 123. Ole Christian Carlsen. Thank you to these 5 people. If you like my channel and wish to support, Patreon link is in the description below. Tier 10 and above, and I'll be butchering your name. My friends, if you want news about this Russo-Ukrainian war 3 times a day, you'll get it in my Twitter account in the most compact form. Also check out my Instagram account, link is in the description below. Cool photos, cool videos about my doings in Estonia. Until my next video, Slava Ukraini.